In my conversation with Wen Jiabao, China's premier, one of the most complex and controversial subjects was the discussion of democracy. Wen has deep experience with the issue. In 1989, he was one of the Communist Party officials who went to Tiananmen Square to talk to the protesters. I asked him whether that experience had made him want to slow down or stop political reform. Listen to what he had to say. I will take advantage of your kindness and ask a question that many people around the world wonder about. There is a very famous photograph of you at Tiananmen Square in 1989. What lesson did you take from your experiences in dealing with that problem in 1989?
我觉得我们国家
I believe that while moving ahead with the economic reforms, we also need to advance political reforms.
必须继续推进政治体制改革。
As our development is comprehensive in nature,
我们的发展应该是全面的发
our
展，
reform should also be
我们的
comprehensive.
改革也应该是全面的改革。其实你的问题
I think the core of your question is about the development of democracy in China.
我以为
I believe when it comes to the development of democracy in China,
无外乎在三
we
个
talk about progress to be made in 3 areas.
第一，
Number 1,
要逐步完善
we need to gradually improve the democratic election system
使
so that the state power will truly belong to the people
真正属于人民。
and state power will be used to serve the people.
第二，
Number 2, we need to improve the legal system, run the country according to law, and establish the country under the rule of law. And we need to build an independent and just judicial system.
第三，
Number 3, government should be subject to oversight
群众的监督。
by the people, and that will call on us to increase transparency in government affairs.
特别是
And particularly, it is also necessary for government to accept oversight by other parties.
When I go to China and I'm in the hotel, and if I type in the words Tiananmen Square in my computer, I get a firewall, what some people call the Great Firewall of China. Can you be an advanced society if you don't have freedom of information to find out information on the internet?
中国的互联网
China now has over 200 million internet users,
中国互联网的
and the
自
freedom
由
of internet in China is recognized by many, even from the West.
许多人所公认的
Nonetheless, to uphold state security, China, like many countries in the world, has also imposed some proper
采
restrictions.
取必要的限制。
And that is for the safety, that is for the overall safety of the country and for the freedom of the majority of the people.
我也可以告诉你，你可以在
I can also tell you that on the internet in China,
看到许多直接
you can have access to a lot of postings that are quite critical about the government.
了解情况。
I frequently browse the internet.
What are your favorite sites?
I browsed a lot of internet websites.
May I ask you about another set of possible talks? The Dalai Lama has said now, it appears, that he would accept China's rule in Tibet. He accepts the socialist system in Tibet, and what he asks for is cultural autonomy and a certain degree of political autonomy. The talks apparently are stuck at a lower level between the Tibetans and the Chinese government. Why don't you, given your power and your negotiating skills, take the issue yourself, and you or President Hu Jintao were to negotiate directly with the Dalai Lama and solve this issue once and for all for the benefit of the Chinese people and of course the Tibetan people who are also in China?
他在世界
In many places all over the world, the Dalai Lama keeps preaching about the idea of the so-called autonomy in the Greater Tibetan region.
要利用宗教
And actually, the so-called autonomy that he pursues is actually to use religion to intervene in politics.
很多美国人
And they want to separate the so-called Greater Tibetan region from the motherland.
大藏区包
And many people in the United States have no idea how big is the so-called Greater Tibetan region.
云南
The so-called Greater Tibetan region, preached by the Dalai Lama, actually covers Tibet, Sichuan, Yunnan, Qinghai, and Gansu, altogether 5 provinces. And the area covered by this so-called Greater Tibetan region accounts for a quarter of China's territory.
几十年来，我们对
For decades, our policy towards the Dalai Lama remains unchanged.
只要他承
That
认
is, as long as the Dalai Lama is willing to recognize that the Tibet is an inalienable part of China's territory, and as long as the Dalai Lama gives up his separatist activities, we are willing to have contact and talks with him or his representatives.
这种商谈的
Now,
结果
sincerity holds the key to producing result out of the talks.
What action would you like to see from the Dalai Lama that would show sincerity?
其实
Actually, I already made it clear that when we observe any individual, the Dalai Lama included, we should not only we should not only observe what he says, but also watch what he does.
他的诚意
His sincerity can be demonstrated in giving up separatist activities.
那个时候
But then, everything depends on the development of the situation.
China's Premier Wen Jiabao is a reading man and a poet, and I asked him about something he was reading. You've talked about elections many times. Do you think in 25 years there will be national elections in which there will be a competition? There will be perhaps 2 parties running for the positions such as your own.
25年以后的事情，我很难预
It's
见。
hard for me to predict what will happen in 25 years' time.
我认为中国的民主政治
This being said, I have this conviction that China's democracy will continue to grow.
再过20-30年，
In 20 to 30 years' time, the whole Chinese society will be more democratic and fairer, and the legal system in China will further be improved. The socialism, as we see it, will further mature and improve.
会更加公正。
On that happy note, I thank you, Your Excellency. I'm sure your people are worried that we've taken a little bit extra time, and I thank you in advance for your kindness and your frankness.